the scientist.
Suffice it that the blood of 1,000 men and women was spilled in these walls. Limbs twisted and broken, eyes gouged from bloody sockets, flesh burned black.
Please. The way of the dead. In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no schemes. But you have to realize that we're all just a mouse that a cat has by the tail.
The number you have reached, 911, has been changed to a non-published number.
What's up, guys?
Welcome to World of the Unexplained. I'm Trent Lackey.
I'm Jay Scott.
Chuck Braddock here.
He never speaks into the mic, does he?
Well, I mean, he's busy.
I know, he's a busy man.
Happy 4th of July to everybody. We expect to hear some kind of explosion somewhere.
Firecrackers.
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably going to happen.
Well, tonight we've got Linda S. Godfrey, the author of Hunting the American Werewolf. She's also the author of Beast of Bray Road. She's going to tell us about some of the unique sightings all over the United States. And we're going to talk about what this werewolf creature is. Is it a shapeshifter? Is it a cryptid? What is it?
And amongst other things,
Yeah. And you remember you can call us here live in the studio, 800-960-2289 with any of your questions, or locally at 336-996-1596. So we'll bring her on now. Feedback. Wonderful. Linda, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you? It sounded kind of like a little wolf howl there.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's the time, right?
Yeah. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here. A very big honor.
Oh well.
Well, thank you.
And likewise. I guess
what got you into this whole business?
Well, it came about unexpectedly. About 13 years ago, when I was working as a newspaper reporter for a countywide newspaper, and hadn't been there very long, was a pretty new reporter, and along came a woman who told me that people around the area of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, which is in the southeastern part of Wisconsin, were seeing what they were calling a werewolf, for lack of a better word. They weren't sure that it was really a Lon Chaney fur-sprouting type, actual werewolf, but it was about 6 feet tall, shaped like a man except for its legs, and it had a head like a wolf covered with fur, and it had been seen kneeling, holding roadkill and eating it, chasing people's cars, doing all kinds of crazy things that, any kind of a wolf or dog or coyote just could not do. Walking upright, I might add.
wow, yeah, that's pretty crazy.
How many reports initially did you get?
Well, there were like 4 or 5, and the thing was that they were not just talking about it amongst themselves. They had actually been going to the county's animal control officer and saying, we saw this thing, we don't know what to call it, but if there was such a thing as a werewolf, this is what it looks like, And so what I found out when I began to investigate was that the county animal control officer actually had a manila file folder, which he showed me, which was labeled werewolf, because he didn't know what else to call it either. Huh. And that's what he was keeping the files in of all these people's reports. And at that point, when you've got any kind of a county official with a file folder in his official desk labeled werewolf, that's news.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Break out the silver bullets, kids.
Exactly. And, we did not expect that it would ever go beyond the county. We thought, I remember talking about it with my editor, and we were saying, people will have fun with it for a little bit, and then it'll blow over, and everybody will all forget about it. And here, some 10 to 13 years later, and 2 books, and umpteen, national TV shows and whatever, it's still going strong. And I'm still getting reports weekly.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
it is.
How many of these reports do you think are perpetrated by hoaxers?
Very few. There are some that kind of toss out. There are things that I look at. People who are overeager, or their facts just don't add up. Very, very few. Most people are reluctant to call me. Oftentimes, it's not the witness themselves, but say a spouse or a good friend or a coworker who will alert me and say, "You have to talk to so and so. They saw this thing," and then they'll coax them into talking to me. Most of them just don't want to talk about it. A lot of them actually relive their trauma in talking about it. It makes them very uneasy and nervous. They oftentimes will not report it until years later. They've just been keeping it to themselves. Sometimes they will go for years thinking they're the only person on earth who ever saw this weird thing and thinking they're crazy. And then suddenly they'll see something about this, or they'll see me on the Travel Channel or something like that, and they'll go, "Wow, that's what I saw." And then they feel kind of like they have permission, or maybe they'll see one of my books. And that's what I've heard from a lot of people, is that either, seeing the books or seeing me on TV has given them what they finally feel is permission to talk about it to somebody who is not going to make fun of them.
Oh yeah, I think that's a valid argument. I mean, the first thing you're going to think generally is, this person's crazy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or he's wanting attention.
Yeah, exactly. And most of them get hooted out of the house by their own families as soon as they bring it up, and so they just shut up about it.
Well, now, how do you think this beast relates? I know they made a film years ago, The Brotherhood of the Wolf, I believe was the name of it, and that was based on an actual case, I believe, if my memory serves me correct. How do you think that things like that tie in? I know you mentioned in your book some of the other cryptid creatures, but how do you think that those sightings may tie into? I'm not sure if you're familiar with the North Carolina. What is it?
Oh, the Bladenburg vampire beast.
I don't know. I think it's possible that some of the sightings are related. It's really hard to say, until we have one of these things in front of us. The thing that normally happens, with a few exceptions, is that when people see this thing, it seems to be behaving in ways, for the most part, that a natural animal would. A few times they'll report, I've had just a couple of people report like morphing or materialization, that kind of thing. Most of the time, it's somewhere out in the, some remote area, oftentimes really cold outside, chewing down on a piece of really disgusting-looking roadkill, doing things that don't seem supernatural, that seem like, some kind of predatory scavenger might do.
Uh-huh. Oh.
So it acts like a carnivore. However, we can get into this later. There are all sorts of theories about how it could be doing that and still be, partly in another dimension, too.
Wow.
Yeah, I noticed at the beginning of your book you talk about the different dimensional ideas. Talking about, the older school of religious thought, and chapter 1, break dancing in the dark.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, though, the idea of shape shifting, and especially in the modern, our modern times, it's just something that you don't hear about. And I know when we were kids, you remember the only books that you would ever find. I know Daniel Cohen wrote a book about werewolves, and we just don't see a lot of material out there anymore on it.
It's very anachronistic, it seems, but to some extent. Anyway.
Yeah, it's, I know that book that you mean. Actually, I'm writing right now a book for a New York publisher for young adults on werewolves, kind of I don't know if it's the updated Daniel Cohen type of thing. I'm trying to get a little bit more modern stuff in it. The thing is that these sightings that we're getting now are different than your traditional medieval werewolves that, all the thousands of people who were executed, where they were definitely connected with witchcraft in people's minds, and people were sure that it was of the devil and that kind of thing. These things that we're seeing now, and I should add that what I chronicle in these books, and the reason I wrote the books and I'm so impressed with it, is that we have a huge body of contemporary sightings, unlike just about anything else that you can think of. The closest thing that I can compare it to is maybe the Mothman sightings in West Virginia for sheer number of witnesses. But they're different than the medieval things because they do seem like natural animals. I've been able to, over the great number of cases that we've logged in, develop sort of a comprehensive scenario for what these creatures generally look like and how they behave. And maybe that would be helpful for your listeners to hear.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, certainly. Go ahead.
So they know what we're talking about. Well, the profile of this thing is that it's usually described as between 5.5 feet and 7 feet tall, and weighing between 150 and maximum 250 pounds, which, by the way, makes it much smaller than a Bigfoot, for instance. Bigfoot, even the small ones, are supposed to be, unless it's a real small juvenile, are usually around 400 pounds and minimum of 7 to 8 feet tall. They get much larger out on the West Coast. So that is the size. The head, among people who get to see this thing and get a clear look at it, is clearly canine with a long wolf-like muzzle. But people will often say, but it had a longer snout than a wolf's. With upright, pointed ears, with they'll usually describe it as shaggy or very wild, unkempt-looking fur, not like you would see in a pet. Yellow eyes. Most often with Bigfoot, and people do report Bigfoot sightings to me too. I think there's a lot of confusion between the two. With Bigfoot, you'll often get red eyes or just kind of dark black patches. With this thing, they're, especially if it's seen at night, which most of the sightings are, they're seen as yellow. Some people notice a tail, other people don't. But the other big defining thing is that the people who get a good look at it see its legs, and they'll say to me things like, well, it was running really easily on its hind legs, but the legs were bent backwards. And what they really mean by that is a dog's heel is about the same distance from the ground in comparison to a human leg as our knee. So we expect, apes and humans, our legs bend forward, where there's a knee, and we land flat on our feet. Dogs actually are running on what would be their toes and the balls of their feet, if it was a human anatomy, and their heels are way up high. So it looks like they're running backwards, but actually, their knees are up where we would think of it as being the thigh.
Okay.
So it's a very natural thing. The other thing they'll mention is that it runs a little bit hunched over, which is really consistent with how their neck would have to hang, from their backbone, because, a canine's head is just not attached in the same way as its backbone is as a human's. And they even run differently. You can't even say, well, apes run like that. Most of the great apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, all of them will normally run as what we call knuckle draggers. They have very long arms, and their knuckles kind of hit the ground and sort of help propel them forward. These things run around on their hind legs, and I've had many witnesses notice this. They can go very easily from running on all fours to running on two legs, and can seem to go equally fast either way, and are as at home. I even had one of my most recent sightings, which happened to be in Michigan, which is really a hot spot right now. Actually saw the thing. It was trying to escape into a cornfield where, the corn isn't very high this time of year. It's only like 1.5 feet high. It went from a standing position down to flat on its belly, and was pulling itself with its arms like you would see, like you see a soldier in a war movie crawling along above a...
You actually saw this yourself?
No, I didn't. No, I'm sorry. One of the most recent sightings that I've had phoned into me from Michigan described this. I have never seen the creature. I wish I would, but I haven't.
That was my money question. I was going to say, have you seen anything yet? Because I know you get new sightings all the time.
Yes.
And especially, going out and tracking down all these stories like you have, eventually you're going to probably run into one of these things if they're out there.
I hope so. I really do. But I do hope it's from the safety of a closed vehicle, preferably something like a armor-plated thing.
Humvee.
Humvee would be nice. Yeah, armor-plated Humvee.
I've noticed also, at least this last sighting, I just read it here. They describe the creatures demeanor, attitude. And a lot of Bigfoot sightings, for example, they're much more timid and getting away and, oh my gosh, it's wild. Humans, I gotta leave. These, at least this last sighting, the creature was described as being very aggressive or and meaning harm. Would that be another distinction? Is that a commonplace thing?
Yeah, and that's something I've really been noticing more and more. It wasn't really apparent, way back, a decade ago when the sightings began. I didn't realize there was this difference. But I've had people who have seen Bigfoot, and Bigfoot's really different. It's got, it's bigger. It's got a flat face. It walks, on those. Everybody knows what Bigfoot prints look like. They're almost a stereotype now, the big flat foot, whereas these things leave like dog prints. I keep emphasizing that, there's a big difference between these two. But it is not uncommon for witnesses of either one to feel that they are getting some sort of mental impression of a message, not words. It's not like these things speak English and transmit words to them, but they will get, an impression that they can sort of translate themselves. And with the Bigfoot, it's usually things like, don't concern yourself with us, we're fine, you're fine, just sort of non-committal, sort of nice separation things. With this thing, it's stay the hell away from me. You're there, I'm here, let's leave it like that. I've even had one woman who felt that it was impressing on her, if you tell anybody about me, I'll come and get you. And she was so frightened. And this is like a young mom in her 30s who works for a medical office. I mean, she had absolutely no previous experience or reading about anything like this. But she saw this thing and was so frightened that she didn't even tell her husband for 3 days because she was just certain that it could come and find her.
Wow. Do you think in the future that the paths will cross between humans and this creature in sort of a negative way? And do you think some person is going to go too far and something terrible is going to happen to them?
Well, I hope not. I have had witnesses who really feel that this thing wanted to do them harm. If you've read Hunting the American Werewolf, for instance, in Michigan, the little section I call Don't Mess with the Repo Man, actually he probably would have titled that Don't Mess with the Man Wolf, because he encountered this thing out in this lonely lake road, and he really felt it was sneaking up on him, and he heard the twig snap. And he said he turned around, and he just felt so certain that this thing was angry, that he had noticed it, that, he had been intended for its dinner, and barely managed to get in his truck in time. And I've heard that from other people, that they feel it's looking at them like their lunch. And, I think in some instances, a lot of it might be sort of an aggressive act, kind of like a gorilla will beat on its chest and tear up bushes hoping that intruders will leave. I think maybe that's the equivalent. But to my knowledge, I've never heard of an instance where a human was actually hurt by one, unless they were totally eaten and never heard from again, and didn't live to tell the tale.
Now, why Michigan, and why some of these other places? What do you think? What do you think attracts? I don't know.
The ecology of
Michigan. Yeah. Why Michigan? Why not South Florida? Why not North Carolina? Why not? And I'm not saying that there hasn't been reported cases, but do you think that the reason that there's more in Michigan is because of the landscape, or do you think it's a combination of landscape and environment and climate, as well as maybe the types of people, in that area? Like, for example, some people in the South may feel differently about reporting some sighting like this than someone from Michigan or someone from L.A., for example.
Well, in the South, they do have what they call the Skunk Ape. And I've seen reports of skunk apes that could have been Bigfoot or could have been this thing. And, in fact, I was just in touch with a researcher in Texas who had just come across my work and called me. He's with the American Anthropological Research Foundation. And they have down there what they were assuming was some kind of Bigfoot, but they call it snout nose. Because it had a long snout. and had just, most people don't think to look at the legs and differentiate, but from what he was telling me, it sounded exactly like the man-wolf down south. So it does appear all around the country. I have it only as far west, though, as Wichita, Kansas is my westernmost sighting. But it seems that Wisconsin and Michigan are the central locations so far in terms of sightings. And I can't help but think that maybe it has something to do with the Great Lakes. Maybe it has something to do with so much water. I mean, both states are really blessed in water. And one thing I've always noticed is that when this is something I really tried to do with every sighting in Hunting the American Werewolf, was really look at the landscape and the topography. And I could almost always find at least a creek that it was following. More often a marsh or a river or a lake, were right in the immediate sighting vicinity. So that this thing seems to like to follow waterways. This can argue for a natural creature. It's also something that is said of supernatural beings, so it's kind of interesting. It argues both ways in that way. You also find in Wisconsin and Michigan, we have a lot of wilderness areas and state forests that are very protected, very wild, and can leave some sort of habitat. I think one reason for the increasing number of encounters might be that we are developing so much as humans that these things are kind of getting forced out into areas where they prefer not to be. On the other hand, they've learned what roadkill is, and found it an easy target.
Yeah, and if they are sort of along the lines of a predatory creature, well, they're going to try to go for the easiest kill, with the least possible amount of injury to themselves. So.
Exactly.
I want to go ahead and give the 800 number real quick. It's 800-960-2289. If you have a question for Linda, please give us a call here. If you've got a sighting, we'd even love to have you call in more.
That's super.
That's 800-960-2289, or locally at 336-996-1596. You can also grab those numbers on our site, worldoftheunexplained.com, or you can go to omnisoundradio1.net and jump into the chat room. It's filling up here, and come on by and ask us some questions. If you're too shy about being on the air with us tonight, you have no problem relaying them to her from the chat. So anyway, we're going to take a break here in about 3 minutes, but we'll try to narrow this down a little bit more. What do you think about some of the earlier diseases? And I know when I say disease, I can't remember exactly what it's called. Not lycanthropy by any means, but the disease with the two performers that were really big in the
I never can remember what that thing is called. Porphyro or something? I don't know.
Porphyriaism? I don't know. It's where the hair covered their entire bodies and
faces. Yeah, it makes them completely hairy.
Oh, right. I know exactly what you mean. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's called hairy. I also want to call it trichinosis, but that's the disease you get from pigs. It's trichosis. And it can even occur just on people's elbows. But, you have people like the Gomez brothers in Mexico who are 98% covered with fur. You've got their close successor, the Chinese hair boy, who wants to be the first completely hair-covered rock star, who is 96% covered in fur. And, I like to point these people out in my books because they're not werewolves. They're not man-wolves. They're people with a lot of hair. Yeah. And that's the only way you can differentiate that. They don't live in the wilds. They're very civilized. They're human. They're intelligent. They often usually marry, and sometimes have normal children. They're just differently haired.
Like Chuck, our producer. Sorry, Chuck.
Oh, man.
He's got that back hair thing going on. I have no idea. Do you have the back hair thing going on?
Please.
But it was something I just figured we'd bring up because I know that's a lot of times, some of the times it's expressed as a way that the ancient people mistook these creatures because they were actually humans, and that's one of the things that you hear a lot. But we're going to go ahead and take a short break, Linda. If you'll hang on the line with us, we'll be right back here in just a second on World of the Unexplained.
See you in a bit, guys.
Sacrificing millions of dead brain cells so you don't have to. This is Omnisound.
Good evening. This is Bishop Manchester, and you're listening to World of the Unexplained.
And we're back, guys. Linda, you still with us?
Here.
Okay, great. Over the break we were talking about some of the Native American stuff that you wanted to get into. Why don't you give our listeners a primer on that? Are you in our chat room yet, Linda?
Well, I don't think my browser is going to manage it, unfortunately.
Oh, okay, well.
So you'll have to just relay any questions to me.
Okay, not a problem. Anyway, you wanted to mention the Native American, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Yeah, it's something that people ask me about quite often, right really from the beginning. And I have had members of certain area tribes contact me and say, yeah, this is something that, our forefathers knew about, that the grandfathers have talked about. It's something that's in our tribal history. So it's not something unknown to them. And I know that ice, or had a heart made of ice and would melt down, and was really related a lot to cannibalism and starvation, in the cold north woods.
Very negative kind of creature.
Yeah, and so that kind of got me looking, and I did find references, for instance, the Canadian Cree talk about hairy heart beings, which are creatures that are completely covered with hair and that occasionally interact with men. However, they could refer also to a Bigfoot or Sasquatch type of creature, too. There's not a lot of definition. Well, I've been very interested in Native American lore, and here in Wisconsin, we're kind of unique. We have these things called animal effigy mounds that are pretty much unique to the world, except for Ohio has the Great Serpent Mound, of course. And there are a few mounds from Wisconsin that extend into Iowa and Illinois, neighboring places. And one day I was looking at a map of these animal effigy mounds, which are shaped like certain, in very, very abstract shapes of certain animals. And there's one called the water panther or water lizard, which my Ho-Chunk friends tell me is more correctly called a water spirit. And remember, I mentioned earlier that this thing likes to follow waterways, so it seems to have a water connection. Well, I had also been mapping out the major sightings areas around Wisconsin. And when I laid one map over the other, they completely overlapped in terms of where the major sightings areas were and the major water spirit effigy mounds locations.
Really?
Which I thought was just too strange for coincidence.
Yeah, it sounds it.
I mean, it's just one of those, cosmic moments when you go, whoa, how did this ever happen? And it actually got me an interview with a Ho-Chunk elder who is also an anthropologist. And they were fascinated to learn this. It was something that had not really occurred to them. So if this thing, is not, or maybe it is a natural creature and it's just something that they knew about way back when and made one of their totem animals to be it, or some people have suggested that maybe it means that this was sort of a guardian figure, sort of put in these mounds to guard the sacred areas.
Well, that certainly would make sense.
How many of these creatures do you think are out there now? By if you just take all the sightings that you've had together and kind of add everything up, what would be a rough estimate of what you would think would be a possibility of how many would exist?
Well, it's hard to say. I would say that I have to preface this by saying, because a lot of people will just assume there's only one, and that over 7 decades and all these counties and states, one little thing has been zipping around, popping up and showing its same little face to everybody. And
it's a busy wolf.
I keep saying, well, I don't think so. Either having so many sightings means one of two things. It's either supernatural, wherein numbers don't count, or it's got a breeding population, which is a sobering thought.
Yes, it is.
To think about. But I've had witnesses see more than one. I've had several see pairs where one appeared to be slightly smaller, as if it were either maybe a male-female or, an adult-adolescent pair. I've had one group of 4 people witness 4 separate creatures right in the same area. First one larger one and then 3 slightly smaller ones. All of which were bipedal, able to run on their hind legs. I've recently had a group of people in Michigan who've been observing a certain area for several months now, and between them, they've been able to identify 3 different individuals in one certain spot, including one that seems more gray, like it's older and bigger, 2 that are darker brown, and a little bit smaller, one that's quite a bit thinner.
Well, that seems to support the cryptozoological theory.
Yeah, it kind of does, because it sounds like natural variation that you see, say, in a wolf pack.
We've got a question from one of our chat room folks here.
Sure.
Okay, here it is. Based on the water spirit information the speaker just said, would you define a werewolf as being the result of a genetic change, a viral-bacterial change, or of a spiritual nature for the basis of the creation of the creature?
Well, in terms of it being a Native American type of guardian, I think that what most people assume in that case is that it's something that maybe was conjured by a shaman, and oftentimes they would work with existing earth spirits, or sometimes with their own body doubles. Their own astral energy would maybe be another way of saying it. And I think probably in order to have something very long-lasting, it would almost have to be something that was an earth spirit. I don't know about getting into, changing the actual bioentity itself. That's something you really couldn't prove, and I don't know if that's even what they would exactly claim to do. Maybe I'm getting into areas that are beyond me in that way. But yeah. I think the general assumption, is that it would be something that a shaman would do, working with earth energy spirits, which would be their usual mode of operation, or their own, secondary or astral bodies.
Right.
What do you believe, as far as, or have you made that, and have you made that decision yet?
No, I haven't. I did want to just say, if I can jump back real quick, I never quite answered your question about how many of these things I think
there are.
Okay, go ahead.
The person I was talking to in Texas, who has been sort of monitoring Bigfoot activity and mapping it in a very scientific way, estimated that they figured within several square miles, and I'm thinking maybe a 20 by 20 square mile area, I could be wrong, they were thinking there might be like 150 individuals. I think that would be high for the man wolf. I'm thinking there could have been, it's possible maybe 150 in the state.
Multiple sightings, though.
I mean, that's high for like a regular wolf population.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking at the most, 150 in the state, and probably less, because I do think they would have a large territorial range, and the evidence, I think, shows that they're migratory, because they'll be seen in one area for a while, and then you won't see them anymore. For instance, originally, I called it the Beast of Bray Road because the original sightings flap occurred on this little road called Bray Road outside of Elkhorn, but it has really not been seen there all the time, like it used to be. For years. I've had one sighting a couple years ago, and that's the only one in 10 years. So that suggests to me that, and then it'll pop up somewhere else where it's seen quite often for a while. So that suggests to me that it migrates like any other large predator.
No, I've got a question for you. Supposing, and this is a lot of, a lot of
speculation.
Thank you. Yeah, supposing, I'm just not finding words tonight. Supposing that this creature is the same creature as the mythological creature that people used to hunt with silver bullets. Mm-hmm. Where do you think that idea came into being of, this is a supernatural creature and you have to kill it with this silver bullet? Why silver? How do you think that idea came into the psyche of these werewolf hunters?
Well, I think a lot of that was popularized in Hollywood. A lot of the mythology we have with the full moon and the silver bullets and everything came out of those early Lon Chaney movies. However, I think maybe where they got it from was back in the olden days, the idea was that these things were of the devil. So in order to kill them, you had to have something that was sacred from a church. Now, in your churches, what would you have? You would have ceremonial, baptismal fonts and vessels and things made of silver. So if you wanted something that was sacred, you couldn't use a regular old lead bullet. You would melt down some silver from a church and make bullets, and then you would be injecting this evil thing, this evil, unholy thing, with something that was holy. And, it was almost more the spiritual impact than the explosive impact that would kill it. And, in fact, back in France in the Middle Ages, you had, a lot of people are familiar with the story of the Beast of Javedon. It was a supposed werewolf, and there was some kind of predatory wolf-like creature that killed, I think, 100 or so people. I've got it written up better in my book. But according to legend, it was finally killed by someone who melted down a silver chalice from the church, made the bullets from that, and then they did actually parade some kind of large, dead, wolf-looking creature through the streets of Javedon, so they killed something. I'm not sure what it was. And I think that is probably where the silver bullet came from. It just so happens that the church artifacts considered holy enough to kill something demonic were normally made of silver, and that was the thing that could be melted down and used.
Well, Trent just got back from his honeymoon not too long ago, and he was up in the Massachusetts Salem area. And didn't you see like an old vampire hunter kit? Can you tell us about that? I think it had some silver in it.
Yeah, actually did. It was in this museum of somebody we hope will be a guest soon, and it had three balls. I'm assuming like musket balls, and they. And it was anyway, but it was anyway. I believe it to be that it was also made out of silver. So I wonder if the connection of the holiness.
Very much the same, because vampires were considered of the same ilk. They were things of the devil, and if you wanted to kill something of the devil, that's why holy water, was also supposed to be effective, and consecrated ground, and all that kind of thing. It was very, very much a religious thing.
Oh, certainly. I also wanted to comment, and I can't remember where I read this, and maybe it's just utter hogwash, but going back to the old werewolf mythos or whatever, especially in concern with the lunar aspect, the full moon and the phases of the moon, and the connection with silver and the moon. Is that something that was that you've discovered in your research as well, or?
I have not really been able to make any connection between lunar cycles and appearances of this creature. I actually had one person who was a meteorologist offered to look at all of the sightings and let me know what the lunar cycle was for each of them, if I could furnish him the dates. Unfortunately, a lot of these sightings are not reported for 2, 3, 10 years, and people don't remember the exact date anymore. They'll say, well, it was either the end of September or early October, I'm not sure which, I just know it was around then. And sometimes they're off by 1 or 2 years, So I haven't been able to get a complete enough record. But I have noted that when people, one thing that I always ask people is the weather conditions, if they remember if it was a full moon, time of year and that sort of thing. And of those who remember, I haven't been able to see it. It's just as likely to be, a new moon as a full moon, or, completely dark as brightly lit by a moon, if not. So I haven't been able to make any kind of positive correlation.
Okay. We have another question from the chat room.
Hang on just a second. We'll get to that in a minute. Go right ahead.
Okay.
I did have a question. It was basically, related to some of the, we looked at it from a kind of the lycanthropy issue from kind of a cryptozoological perspective. But let's look at it from a mythical and a mystical perspective. There's a lot of talk early on about some of these rituals that these people could do, putting a circle around them and, lathering their body in different kinds of things and doing chants and becoming these creatures.
The skin dancers, where they wear the skin of the animal.
Yeah, different things like that. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, a lot of these were, considered witchcraft during the Middle Ages, and would probably be considered, fairly normal shaman-type activities, in tribal type of cultures. Certainly one of the biggest ways that you could become a werewolf was by having a wolf belt, or they would call it a girdle, we would call it a belt, made out of a werewolf pelt, and you'd put this on, and usually you would have incantations to say, and lots of times you would smear yourself with some kind of special fat of some kind of animal or even human that had herbs and different concoctions in it, and this would turn you into a werewolf. And lots of times they weren't talking about your actual body turning into a werewolf. What it would mean when you turn into a werewolf was you would go to sleep, and your astral body, your psychic double, would then go forth as a solid appearing werewolf. And you'd be lying sleeping somewhere, and this thing would be out there roaming, and let's say that the local farmer had been saving up some, bullets he melted down from the local chalice at the church and shot you. Well, then you'd be found the next day sleeping with a bullet wound in your arm in the same place where the farmer shot the wolf. And so then they'd know you were the wolf and get you.
Well, I've got a question from one of our listeners here. Has anyone asked if this phenomena is similar to what's been reported at Skinwalker Ranch? I just heard about that a couple weeks ago, she says.
Yeah, that's a really interesting book. I've read that. And in some ways, it is, in some very strange ways. Skinwalker Ranch is kind of like a little microcosm of all these giant window areas, such as the Big Thicket in Texas, and, I think you could rightly say southeastern Wisconsin, where when these creatures start showing up, whether they're a cryptid, actually, or whether they're supernatural, for some reason, you also have Bigfoot showing up, which we do. You see Black Panthers. You get mystery lights, balls of lights, all kinds of phenomena that are associated with interdimensional window areas, such as the ones that John Keel, Fortean researcher John Keel, once liked to talk about. And I think that the big claim to fame of the Skinwalker Ranch was that it was really just such a window area. The owner of the ranch actually saw these windows into what looked like other worlds, and then all these really strange creatures would come out. But they had one creature that it kind of starts the book out that looked just like a gigantic wolf that they kept shooting, and it really had almost no effect on it. It was very, very scary. And I have had, I pay attention when people tell me that they see a giant wolf-like creature that was way, way too big to be a wolf or a dog. And it just kind of stands and stares at them. It behaves almost exactly the same way this creature in the Skinwalker Ranch behaved. And I do get those, along with the bipedal running creature. And, and we have this smaller Bigfoot around here, too. I mean, it's kind of amazing to think of what all's running around out there in the cornfields, Do they run into each other, Do they, sit down and, knock back a few ears of corn together? Or,
play some cards.
I'm not sure what's going on there, but we've got lizard man, bird man, they all appear. And I think the common denominator is this kind of window area idea.
Yeah, that's perhaps some kind of spiritual portal to some other plane of existence.
Yeah, that lizard man thing's big in South Carolina, isn't it?
Near the coast, in sort of marshy areas. I can't remember what was the name of the town.
I don't know.
But yeah, it was described as being.
I know you mentioned lizard men in your book.
Yeah. The South Carolina one's probably the most famous. But we had a reptile man show up on Highway 13 in northern Wisconsin. It was seen by state troopers and a group of highway workers. And then I've also had one reported on the banks of the Wisconsin River in La Crosse in western Wisconsin. So it's not unheard of, that you've got this other thing running out there too.
Yeah.
So it seems to be that you're kind of still in that indecisive mode where you're not sure exactly, from what your research has given you, you're not sure exactly if it's, if this thing is actually a cryptozoological creature or if it's some kind of interdimensional entity.
Right. I don't think that, we really have enough information for anybody to decide that definitively until you really get your hands on one. Of course, if it's supernatural, nobody ever will probably get their hands on it. I'm still hoping for a really good photo, and they have all these photos, they call them blob squatches on the internet that go around. Some are supposed to be Bigfoot. I've had a few that, are supposed to be the werewolf, and none of them are you able to really make out well enough to say, yeah, this is a real picture of something strange. So, until we have some really good evidence, I know my Native American friends believe that it's kind of, they kind of have it both ways, that this is really a spirit being, but that it is able to travel freely between the spirit world and this one. When it's here, it looks, acts, smells, and behaves like any other corporeal being. It has to eat, it has weight, so you can hear its footsteps. It leaves prints. It does everything, breathes, does everything. But when pressed, it can get back to that window area and go back into the spirit world, and that's why no one ever finds one. And I do have to say, although I reserve judgment because I really don't know, that just looking at the evidence in terms of the stories, their model actually fits the entire body of evidence better than any other model.
I guess there's always the thing is if they're supernatural in origin but trapped in another dimension, you could kind of tie these two things together, because you could say, well, here they are, they're a breeding population in another dimension, and that's why you see varying sizes, varying shapes, varying ages of these creatures.
That's pretty heavy stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it is. I mean,
We'll talk about it later tonight in our cookout.
Oh,
that'll be fun. We're having a cookout tonight, and we're illegally shooting off fireworks. I'm kidding. We're not illegally doing anything. If any Board of Bar Examiner listener is listening to this, we're not doing anything illegal.
Absolutely not. We have no knowledge of it either.
But yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder though about the different ideas and the different things and where these things come from at the original myths. Because I think a lot of people, when they try to explain something that they don't understand, a lot of times their mind will get even more active. And the game we used to play when we were kids, telephone. You would, I would whisper in like Chuck whispers something into my ear, I whisper it into Trent's ear, and it goes back. And when it gets back to Chuck, it's totally completely different. And over time, I think folklore-wise, and looking into things like that, I think that maybe these stories get changed up. Great great grandpa so and so said X, but it turns out to be Z by the time it gets to me.
Right. And that's kind of what's different about these stories. It used to be that most of our stories that people were working with were just like that. They were from generations ago. What's unusual is I'm getting people seeing it now, and the Internet has changed a lot of that, because what happens, for instance, the other night, this guy was just flabbergasted to see one of these and was so freaked out he went home and started Googling all the terms he could think of that were relevant and found my website. And I've had that happen a number of times. People now, when they're freaked out, they don't have to go home and just be quiet about it. They can go online and start Googling and find out what it was.
And that website, by the way, is www.beastofbrayroad.com.
Right, and Bray is spelled B-R-A-Y.
Yeah.
And if you guys have a sighting, please call us here at 800-960-2289. We'd love to talk to you.
And if you don't feel like talking, just email me the sighting. I'll be glad to get it.
Right.
That's good about the Internet. It helps keep that sense of, anonymity. Yeah. And it's,
right, and I do keep people's identities private if they want me to. I don't have to give out names.
Okay, well, how would you distinguish? We're gonna be back. We're gonna have to take another short break, but when we come back, I'd like to ask how you distinguish the perfectly good or what you would consider perfectly honest things from something that may not be a perfectly honest, sighting or hoax. Because I'm sure a lot of people try to, take that into consideration and try to, mess with you and say, hey, I've got a, whatever.
Right. But right now we got to take a break.
But if you'll hang with us and give us a call, 800-960-2289. That's 800-960-2289. Or locally at 336-996-1596. We'll be back in just a moment after this.
You're listening to the OmniSound Radio 1 Network, bringing you the apocalypse with a twist of lime. www.omnisoundradio1.net.
And we're back to World of the Unexplained. Linda, are you still there?
More feedback. Linda, you still with us?
I'm here.
Okay, sorry
Thanks,
about
Scott.
that. Not a problem, man. Not a problem. Anyway, we were talking right before you left. I know Trent was talking with you about some different things during the break, but I wanted to ask about how you separate the fakes from the real deal, or what you consider the real deal in regards to sightings.
Yeah, people always say, that's really the skeptic's first line of defense is they'll say, oh, yeah, it's a bunch of crazy teenagers, or, yeah, they were all drunk, ha, 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 that kind of thing. And I always ask people if they were drinking or doing drugs, and a lot of times you can just tell that the situations they were in at the time wouldn't have lent itself to that. But I've only had one person admit, yeah, he said, I'd been drinking, I was on my way home from the bar. Actually, I had been drinking in town, but when I saw that thing, I sobered up really fast.
Yeah, I reckon so.
So the drinking thing doesn't really hold true. The other thing that I have found interesting, people always say, well, what's the typical witness? And my answer is there isn't one. There are men, there are women, there are people as young as children, all the way up to the elderly. Red collar, blue collar, white collar, pink collar, doesn't matter what their profession is. Doesn't matter, really what their economic status is. I've had from, poverty line people to very well-to-do professional people. The witnesses just span this very broad spectrum. Some are local. Sometimes you have people just passing through who will say, yeah, I live way over here, but I was driving through there and saw this thing. So they run a really broad spectrum. And I actually worked as a newspaper reporter interviewing 1 to 3 people a week for 10 years, which is a lot of people. Oh, yeah. And so you kind of develop a sense, after all that time for, when people are trying to put you on. And with these types of reports, I really very seldom get that. And if I do have that feeling, I'll come right out and ask them, And I try to listen for consistency in what they're saying. That's another big thing. There are just certain gut feelings that you get from people. I've really only had a couple that I thought were putting me on. One actually, and when I do, without libeling or slandering anyone, I'll try and kind of gently point that out if I do use the report at all. For instance, there were 2 young fellows in the first book who I totally believe for the first sighting, but the second sighting just happened to occur at a time when they knew a Hollywood producer was in town.
Oh, really?
Might be interested in putting them on camera, and lo and behold, they saw the thing again.
Wow.
That just it just kind of smacks of phoniness. So I kind of hinted at that in the book, and it really is true. They had made that second one up. But the first one, on the other hand, I totally believed. The guy did not report it to me. His mother called me and kind of coaxed him into making the first one. She told me that he had been so afraid that he actually had to go somewhere and retreat to the family cabin to get over it for a couple of days. And he also had reported it to a cop, which, most teenagers have kind of an aversion to cops and, won't invite trouble if they don't have to. But he had gone and sought out, a local sheriff's deputy and had reported it, and I, was able to verify that, that it was on file.
I wonder what the sheriff thought of that.
Yeah.
Well, I really do think that most of the law enforcement agencies around here know a lot more than they're willing to give out to the public. They tend to really downplay or poo-poo these events. And I can kind of understand it because they don't want hordes of people going out and trampling on private property and, creating a public nuisance as they tend to do. And that was really the case around Bray Road when this story was huge. I mean, it went national in a couple of weeks, and we had literally, there were busloads of people coming up from Chicago bars to this little road and going out and trampling in farmers' fields. And people who lived there had, trespassers coming up and shining their flashlights in their farmhouse windows like they were going to see the creature in the house,
Yeah.
Or that they expected it just to be walking down the road anytime, for their convenience.
Yeah.
And, it just doesn't work like that.
No, it certainly doesn't. Or I guess another danger is maybe hunters going out en masse and trying to capture one,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that's another, people ask about hoaxers. I pity the poor fool, the poor hoaxer who goes out on Bray Road in a wolf costume.
Mr. T is with us tonight.
Out there.
That's great.
To quote Mr. T, I pity the fool.
Yeah, I love that guy. One of my favorites.
Oh man, I'm gonna go off of this for just a second because it's so funny on the internet out there. If you look it up, you may be able to Google it. There's a Mr. T name generator, and you type in your first name. Have you seen this?
Love it.
You type in your first name, and it asks you something else. I don't remember. It asks you a couple questions. It's like, and then you click on the button to generate your Mr. T name. And every time, no matter what you type into it, your Mr. T name is fool. That's it.
Oh, that's great.
Look it up, guys. It's a hoot.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Has
going
nothing
back
to do with werewolves, but
no, nothing
fun.
to do with werewolves, but it is funny. Going back though, Trent, you had mentioned on the break that you wanted to talk about some kind of satanic connection to these creatures.
Well, yeah, going back to the spiritual angle, we had talked about this over the phone, Linda. Would you like to get into that a little bit?
Well, yeah, that was kind of a real hot topic, when this first came out, because kind of about the same time that these sightings were first reported, there were buried piles of animal carcasses found around the county, and people weren't sure. Some of them appeared to have possibly been mutilated. Some were found just in garbage bags at several locations. And I actually go into this a lot more in the second book because I really interviewed the person who was involved in investigating them more. There were a couple of sort of occult things, black hooded figures seen riding out of the woods near Lake Geneva and on a black horse with a black dog, all kinds of ramifications. And there was also a farmhouse in the country not too far from Bray Road that was abandoned, which did show some signs of actual ritual activity going on there. There were symbols spray painted in red on the walls, and you could see where one of the hallmarks of these, blood sacrifice rituals is that you will see places where tarps and things have been nailed up. There'll be regular nail holes around the windows and things. And there was that sort of thing, and teenagers had been going and using it for beer parties. That much was evident, and I think that was probably its main use. But of course, it's much more sensational to talk about satanic rituals. Oh. So that was kind of what got out. And my theory was maybe there were things going on. I don't know. It's impossible to prove, and I think it's completely impossible to prove that if they were going on, that they were related to this creature being seen. Because we really don't, it's been seen so many other places, and we don't have that kind of thing every other place. So, you've got like two completely unrelated evidence, or themes of evidence. Doesn't mean that they mean the same thing at all. It's kind of like Bigfoot and UFO. People, there are certain people who believe that Bigfoot comes out of UFOs.
Yeah.
That they sort of drop them off like a, pet, like when somebody drops their pet out for a walk, to take a walk and do his job, and then get back in the vehicle.
Bigfoot has to relieve himself sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then they choose the earth to do it.
And as big as they are, those flying saucers are pretty little. There's probably no place on board for that.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. Prophet Yahweh was on last week. He says God flies in a UFO.
That's true.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
there you go. I guess anything is possible. And I'm being a little, I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot more to it, and it goes into the interdimensional thing. But anyway, it's kind of the same thing. You can see two things occurring in a similar situation, but unless you actually physically see the werewolf or, and I use the term loosely, or the Bigfoot coming out of the UFO or coming out of the haunted farmhouse, then you don't have a positive link.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
And you want to see one of these things?
Pardon?
I said you would like to see one of these.
I actually would like to get a glimpse of it. I really would, because it's, I think, the only way that I'm really going to be able to answer for myself what I really think these things are, based on my own sight and intuition and that sort of thing. However, I have to add that it wouldn't do me much good, because at this point, who would believe me?
Yeah.
What
a publicity stunt, right?
Yeah,
she's got two books out. And
exactly. Very convenient.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a Saturday Night Live. How convenient.
Now, what do you think? Why hasn't there been any pictures of this creature? Any video? We all know about the old. I can't think of the name of the film. Trent, do you remember the Bigfoot film?
Yeah, the
Patterson Gimlin.
That's it. Thank you.
That's the one.
But we remember that film, and we remember all these pictures of Nessie at Loch Ness and things like this.
Right.
Why hasn't anyone been able to capture this creature on film? Is it because it's dark? It's at night when they usually see these things, or?
That's a very big part of it. Yeah. Well, I do have several daytime sightings. Most of them are at night, between the hours of 10:30 p.m. and 5 a.m. Most of them are completely unexpected. People are caught totally unaware. They're not expecting to see this thing. It's by the side of the road. By the time they can regain their composure, even if they had a camera or a camera phone, ready, it's gone. What it does is it scares the living daylights out of them, so that they sort of have this shock reaction, and then at its first opportunity, it escapes into the underbrush. Like the extreme example that I was saying earlier about the guy who saw it actually, crawling away on its stomach, like an army commando. You can almost picture a grenade between its teeth, But it wants to get away in 99% of the instances, and it's very adept at getting away. Also, we had a sighting here about a month and a half ago, maybe about 20 minutes from my house. A person had seen this thing actually twice in February and then again in April. And so I got someone who had a night vision camera, and we went out, in the same early morning hours between 2 and 4 that it had been seen. And this person, I was driving, we knew the exact locations to go to, and the person who was with me had the camera up at all times, in a position to record. And we saw several deer and some foxes, and so we thought, well, whatever we see, we're going to try and get it on film as a test. And she had it up, she was recording, and when we looked at it later, none of those animals showed up. It's really hard to get something at night unless you've got some kind of illumination source.
Certainly. Let me think. National Geographic does this a lot when they photograph animals in Africa and South America. They use motion sensitive cameras.
Yeah, more sophisticated equipment.
Right.
What we need is really sophisticated equipment with the real infrared.
Sony night shot ain't gonna come.
The heat where it captures the heat image,
Right. I mean, and I guess that's...
The Sony night vision is nice, but it's not.
But see, your average person traveling doesn't have that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, very few people are set up with National Geographic level equipment for, coming home from work in the morning.
Yeah, and then considering the nature of most of the sightings, I mean, that's the last thing you're thinking of.
Exactly.
Oh, there's a giant dog-like creature. I'm going to quickly take a picture of it. You know, I mean, you don't even, I mean, in moments of panic.
If you have something handy to take a picture with, even.
Exactly. My thing is I'm going to get away from it.
Exactly. And then
that's
after
what
that...
most people say. When it dawns on them what they're looking at, they hit the accelerator, and off they go, you know. And I have to say, you know, in my travels around Michigan, researching weird things for the Weird Michigan book that's coming out this month, I actually saw some kind of a light entity that could have been a ghost in a basement where there was supposed to be one. I was standing there with a camera in my hands, set to take a picture, hoping and expecting to take a picture. I was too shocked by what I saw to take the picture.
Yeah.
By the time I gathered my wits about me, you know, it was the whole thing probably lasted 30 seconds, during which time I looked away and looked back because I wasn't believing my eyes. And by the time I looked back and thought of the camera, by then it was fading. So I can really, really understand. And I was prepared and intending to take a picture, but I didn't really expect to see anything.
Right.
And when I did, I was completely just too shocked. So I can completely understand, you know, why people fail to get photographs.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's understandable, definitely. What it's just amazing, the story. What do you do now? Is this your full time? Is this your full time thing? Because I know it's obviously got to be very taxing, going out at all hours of the night, you know, chasing these creatures or trying to find them. Is this all you do now, or? Well, you know, I do go out in the field when I feel there's a good opportunity. But those opportunities don't happen all the time. You know, I actually am getting ready to go to Michigan to do some field exploring right now. But I do write books full time, and normally on this kind of topic and other weird topics. So I probably spend more of my time researching in libraries and, you know, driving around back roads in the daylight. You know, and digging through that sort of thing. And then the field opportunities, when I can actually be stalking them in the wild, are much more rare. Huh. Well, that's great that you can actually, you know, to write books for a living. You started out, you said, as a journalist. I actually, my degree is in art education. Huh. And I worked as a journalist for 10 years, and during that time was also kind of teaching art part-time here and there at a couple of different schools. I'm also an artist and commercial illustrator, and I still do that. Wow. Oh. Yeah, but not the teaching, and the teaching and the newspaper had to go. So the artwork on the cover of your book, did you do that yourself? No, I haven't done any covers yet. You know, I hope to, but I did do the illustrations inside, most of them.
Oh, okay. Now,
that's neat. I never usually pay attention to stuff like, you know, the illustration. Now, I sound like a jerk because I never pay attention to who drew the pictures in the book.
That's normal.
But, you know, yeah, I never really... that's great, though. I didn't know that that's really neat. Oh.
Have you... has anyone ever contacted you to set up hunts independently to go and look for this thing?
Well, yeah, I get emails from people saying... I'm going to come to Elkhorn and solve this thing. Send me all your files, you know, and then I'll go with you and we'll go find this thing. And, you know, I know people are very well-meaning, but it really just doesn't work that way. When I do get a bona fide report that is both accessible and recent enough to make it worthwhile going out there, I do have friends in the business who have electronic equipment, and I work with some different media entities that I'm pretty well set that way, you know, and I have to keep it quiet. You know, I can't really announce it to everybody because then you get everything from those who are hoping to beat you out to it and trample all the evidence to those who are the foos in their little, you know, werewolf suits hoping to hoax somebody. Yeah. No, I'm sure the media attention's gotten really, really crazy. Has anyone approached anybody about a movie deal on this thing? Well, in the first book, The Beast of Bray Road, I kind of go through that. I actually very early on was approached by a man who was a producer with a Hollywood film company who asked me to write a screenplay, and this went on for years through 3 successions of screenplays. The first one was horrible, like Ed Wood level. And then, I mean, really, I would have been,
love it.
Edwina Wood.
Yeah.
And the third one was pretty good. It actually kind of got ripped off for a TV show, but that somebody else did who saw the script, but that's another story. However, there is a DVD out there right now. It's called The Beast of Bray Road that, thank God, I had nothing to do with. Absolutely nothing. They took the name, they used the name, and set it in Elkhorn and just kind of made it an excuse for how many different ways this polyform, full fur monster can completely grind up and eat human beings.
Oh, wonderful. Great.
And it's kind of funny because it's set in Elkhorn, but all the cars have California license plates.
Right. That's a good sign of good editing and.
Oh yeah, great movie making. Now,
exactly.
We have a question in our chat room. Are there any werewolf footprint castings like those taken in support of the Bigfoot sightings?
Well, actually, I do have some castings, but the prints were not in a good medium. This thing had jumped off of a roof and landed on its 2 feet and then run through a garden bed, but the garden bed was full of mulch, and so the footprints, even for mulch, were way big. They're much larger than a timber wolf or a cougar would have been, which wouldn't have landed on 2 feet anyway. And they weren't long like a bear's. I did take prints of them, but they're not defined enough, to get anything like the exact toe pad shapes, or what you would need to definitively identify them. I've had people draw pictures. You'll see in the second book, the Georgia funeral director who was hunting hogs in the swamp and saw this thing, found a footprint about the same size as his size 11 shoe and drew a picture.
Oh wow!
So I've had other people report prints to me, but they're just out. Most people don't carry plaster of Paris with them, which is something I'm trying to change. I'd like to have everybody carry, but in this day of cell phones with cameras, if everybody carried a little 6-inch ruler or a little tape measure in their pocket that they could throw down next to the print, or even if you don't have that, use a dollar bill, or a penny or something, and take a picture of it. I do have a picture that somebody took in kind of a marsh area in Wisconsin too, a photo, of a print that is in the book. So we're getting those. I also have somebody who came up with a gigantic chunk of fur. Actually, it was the same place where we took those paw prints.
Oh, that should be interesting.
Yeah,
Are you having that analyzed?
Yeah, it actually is being done as we speak.
Oh.
And I can't say who's doing it or tell you when the results will be out. But it is being done by top experts right now. So that's kind of interesting.
You'll have to let us know, what the results are on that.
Yeah, I can tell you that I think this is in the book. I took it immediately to a Department of Natural Resources wildlife biologist, and he was puzzled, but he said his best guess was some kind of wolf or wolf hybrid, which is exactly what this creature looks like.
Huh.
So that I think, and the fact that it was found in the same place where something jumped down on 2 feet, ran across a roof on 2 feet, jumped down on 2 feet, and left these large wolf-like, yet too large to be wolf, footprints. And then you find this gigantic hunk of fur. It was 6 inches by 3 inches. I've got a picture of it on my website. Okay. By 1 inch thick in the center.
I think Trent's pulling that up right now, aren't you? Oh no, I thought you were.
Yeah.
Oh, you're chatting. Okay. He's on the website. There it is. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to see the picture.
Yeah, I found it somewhere, but anyway, so that is being done, and it'll be interesting to find out what it is. The problem with it is the same problem they have with identifying Bigfoot fur, which is that you can't make a positive ID if you don't have a standard to compare it to. For instance, if somebody thought it was cougar fur, they would send it in, and they would the lab analysts would go and look up their little sample of cougar fur and then compare the two. Well, in this case, there's nothing to compare it to.
We had a similar situation. I was with my friend Joshua P. Warren. He does another show called Speaking of Strange in Asheville. Speaking of Strange in Asheville, North Carolina. We were there at WWNC, and he had actually had, I can't remember the gentleman's name, it was on his show that night, but he was a Bigfoot hunter, and he had actually found a leg or an arm or something of that nature, and he was having it tested. I don't think it came back with the result that they wanted, but it was exciting stuff, being there in the analysis process.
Oh, yeah. Well, anytime you have something substantial that you can test, at least it gives you hope.
Oh, yeah. And it gives you, proof, too, to anyone that's, casting you and saying, oh, these people are crazy, they're just, making this up for publicity purposes or this or that or the other. It definitely, it's a better, it's basically evidence, you can throw out there and say, here it is, here's what we've got, and I don't know. Well, listen, I'm going to give the number, and we're going to take another short break. It's 800-960-2289. Come on, call in, guys. Linda wants to hear from you, and so do we, especially if you've got a sighting. 800-960-2289. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this. And we're back.
I always jumping the gun.
Yeah, you always jump the gun on that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, during the break, Linda and I were talking about some of these other things, some of the other ideas about where these creatures come from. Time travel has been brought up, as well as just a lot of ideas of, what do they want? And what have you come to find in that regard?
What I can tell right now that they want is to sort of avoid being seen by humans for the moment. They seem curious. They have been noted looking in windows and that kind of thing. But they want to see us without us seeing them, which I find kind of strange. On the other hand, there's one way out there explanation that I do have in my book, because I figured some people are really seeing very odd manifestations of these things, and so it behooves us to look at some kind of way out explanations. And a man had contacted me who was trained by the U.S. government in remote viewing, which probably a lot of your listeners will know is something that was developed in the military to use natural human psychic ability to sort of home in on specific targets. They tried using it for military spy operations. And this guy tried homing in on this creature. And what he got was that they are actually some type of interplanetary, I don't know if I want to say aliens. I guess that would be what they are. They're from somewhere else anyway. And they have been on this earth a very long time and have been sort of held in abeyance, kind of prevented from coming forward, eating all the people like they'd like to, but that their time is coming, and that they're just sort of waiting in the wings for humanity to self-destruct so that they can actually take over and populate the planet, which just sounds so crazy and out there. But
yes,
you put a couple of the things together, and some things make sense. And I was doing some research for another book today, and I was looking in some old Norse mythology, and one of their oldest legends is that of Fenrir the wolf, who was a hybrid child of the Norse gods. His father was Loki, the Norse god Loki, and he was a hybrid. And in this legend, he actually was chained up until the end times, when there was what we might recognize described as a nuclear winter, or perhaps a comet type of winter. When ash covers the sun, makes it red, very similar to biblical descriptions of the end times too. And then this wolf is allowed to have free reign on the earth again.
You're speaking of Ragnarok, right?
Yeah, exactly, Ragnarok. Mm-hmm. Yep, I can tell you're up on your Norse mythology. I'm impressed.
I know a little bit about
He's up on all the really strange knowledge that no one knows. He knows it.
There's something else about the Midgard serpent that holds its mouth and its tail and things like that.
Yeah, but I thought, well, there's just some interesting correlations.
Yeah.
It's easy to say, oh, this guy's crazy, but on the other hand, you find correlations, and you kind of stop and go, maybe there's a little bit to it. Who knows?
Yeah, that's true. Gosh, I had a great question, and it's gone.
It was because you were thinking about that Ragnarok thing.
I kind of remember what I was talking about. Have you received sightings around the world? I mean, particularly what I'm interested in is Europe. Has anybody come to you and talked about a similar creature over there?
Yeah, particularly France. And France, was probably the prime place for loup-garou.
Yeah, that's it, okay.
Yeah, and witch trials. I mean, there were thousands of people, incinerated for being werewolves and witches in France. Well, I've had several people tell me that during World War II, people in their family were servicemen stationed in France, and that they saw this exact same thing in France and had told their families about it. And that it was exactly like it. There's also, on one of my web pages, I have, and I think it's on the history page also, there is a beautiful drawing of this creature with its head kind of turned, its mouth open, turned around towards you. I really shouldn't have put it on the web. I did not put it in my book because I've lost track of the person who drew it. The person who drew it was a Frenchman named Gilles Arnaud, and he actually, I learned about him when the movie deal was going on that didn't happen because he was working as an artist in the Hollywood movie industry at the time and became affiliated with the project, and he said that he had seen this in southern France, and this was his own personal witness sketch of it, what it looked like. It turned over its shoulder and looked at him, with its mouth kind of slavering like this. And then this gentleman just kind of totally dropped out of sight. I have not been able to find him anywhere in the United States or France.
Wow.
So don't know what happened to him. But France seems to be, the main country in Europe that I get other reports from.
Wow.
What about Germany?
Germany, I haven't had too many reports that I can think of off the top of my head, but Germany's interesting, because Hitler had his elite SS group of the werewolves. And they even used an ancient occult symbol called the Wolfsangel, which actually means wolf angle, not angel, although it looks like angel. And their idea was that these were the troops that would sort of, should the Allies win, that would go in and kind of become the insurgency. And they had their own insignia and everything, and they were called the werewolves. And Hitler was very into the occult. I'm sure he probably believed in actual werewolves.
Oh yeah. What do you make of these ideas? I know we'd spoken about the silver bullets and the silver, the ideas of where they had come from with the church background and all this, that, and the other. What do you make of? I know Montague Summers. I'm sure you're probably familiar with his work. What do you make of that?
Well, Montague Summers, of course, is very famous. He's got one of the textbook sort of classics on werewolf cases that everybody goes and refers to, the Werewolf in Lore and Legend. And of course, he's approaching it completely from a religious angle. That these things are demonic forms, and that the stories, especially, and they're really mostly closer to the fantasy idea, things that morph and transform, and real people that turn into real wolves, that sort of thing, and that they need to be exorcised, the people who turn into these wolves. It just really comes so much out of the belief system, I think, and you have to keep in mind where he's coming from with all of these cases. But in general, the ones that he tells about are those that are repeated over and over and over and over and over again in all the other books. But he tells about the tradition of the wolf girdle and the demons and the sorcerers and the ones who probably were just psychologically crazy that turned into cannibals, more or less. And there is a disease called lycanthropy. At least the psychologists refer to it as a mental disorder. Those people who call themselves lycanthropes probably would disagree.
I think Richard Knoll wrote a book years ago, Vampires, Werewolves, and Demons. Is that am I right?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, I don't have that right in front of me, but
that was I mentioned what you were mentioning about the psychological perspectives on that.
Yeah, there are people who really are convinced that they physically turn into these creatures, and they're looking at themselves and seeing hair sprouting and claws. Somebody else is looking at them at the same exact time and just seeing their hands kind of, curl up and gnarl up, but nothing that anybody couldn't imitate. And then what they go and do, they often feel compelled to, run around on all fours and that sort of thing. And I do tell in the second book, there have been a couple of people in halfway homes who, upon hearing the Beast of Bray Road stories, have felt like they are the Beast of Bray Road. And one fellow was even jumping up onto people's cars naked, out there. But I think the telling symptom is that nobody said, "Oh, there's a werewolf on my car." They just,
there's a naked man on my car.
Yeah, there's a crazy naked guy.
On my windshield. It's really gross. Get him off,
I remember another account actually in England in the 80s about a guy who apparently just went berserk, and there were like several policemen that tried to bring him down. And he possessed this like really amazing superhuman strength, and he was slavering, and he was running around.
Lorraine Warren wrote about him. Yeah, I do talk about that in one of the books too. Yeah, and again, it was the same sort of thing.
Right.
If he'd lived in olden times, he would have been probably consigned to a graveyard, and he would have been out there tearing at bones and maybe finding small animals and that sort of thing.
Now, have you ever been contacted by one of these people that claims that they are a werewolf and honestly said, hey, I'm this person, and you should talk to me?
Well, I do have in Hunting the American Werewolf, I've got a whole chapter devoted to one guy who believes that, who is often chained up in his basement. Makes his girlfriend chain him up down there every full moon.
Really?
And, yeah. Which, that could be a lot of...
So do I, but no.
We won't go there, yeah. We won't go there, but, his claim was that he actually made a videotape of himself transforming, but he won't make it available to anybody to look at, So,
come on.
Yeah.
Until I see the videotape, I'm not quite buying it.
I don't think you may want to.
Yeah, and if you use Final Cut Pro or one of these other programs.
Exactly.
Or maybe we'll just quote transformation.
Yeah, you see the cut of the film, and then he's in this little werewolf suit, standing chained in his face.
It's funny because people do send me pictures of themselves in like werewolf costumes. Or they'll say, "Here's the Beast of Bray Road," and I can just tell it's their cousin, Lenny, in a mask and a half gorilla suit standing in a cornfield.
Well, I'm not going to tell you what we get at our P.O. box.
Yeah.
I probably don't want to know.
Yeah, don't.
Nor do our listeners.
But
it's really hard to fake that. It's really hard to fake convincingly a natural animal, or even a supernatural animal that looks coherent, and not cobbled up.
Well, not only that, with all the Photoshop and all the digital stuff we do today, I mean, it would be fairly easy to probably pull, some degree of realism off of it if you're very good at what you do.
Oh yeah, if you're very good, that's true. That's the other side of the coin. Although I think there'd still be ways to analyze just about anything you did, but almost anything anyone takes a picture of or videos these days is going to be suspect for that very reason.
Now, how do you feel about what the moon plays into this, the lunar cycle? of the old myth about, on the full moon, you become a werewolf. Where do you think that came from?
Well, I think, part of that is just old superstitions about the moon.
Yeah.
And part of it is, I guess there is some precedent for certain psychological problems to be worse during cycles of the full moon, and that would play into people, who do have these mental disorders that think they are. Other than that, I don't think there's much correlation.
Well, certainly so. Well,
other than that, creatures might find it easier to see and travel about, and it would be easier for people to see them under a full moon.
Yeah, well, that's true as well. Well, gosh, I don't know if we've really answered the question whether it's a cryptid or a spiritual being.
Good.
Both.
I don't think you can answer it.
Yeah.
I think you're on dangerous ground when you try, and as soon as you pin it down and say it's one thing or the other, something's going to crop up and prove you wrong.
Yeah, and I mean the arguments and the evidence and the descriptions and this discussion sort of lends itself that it really could go either way. Especially.
I think so.
I'm just wondering what if it is a crypto creature. I'm wondering you make this argument with Bigfoot too. And I'm wondering if it is some kind of cryptozoological creature, then why hasn't there ever been any remains found or any bones, any kind of, or if they have been found, were they just misinterpreted as a wolf bone?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that if you did find this thing dead, and actually I have had one or two people say that they saw something that looked like this that was like 6 feet long from nose to tail lying dead on the road, that it would just look like a large wolf or a large hybrid. What's unusual about it is its size and its behavior, its ability to walk on its hind legs, use its paws in a manner that like humans would use their hands more than an animal, and the way that it walks around easily on its hind legs. If it's lying there dead, you can't see it doing any of those strange behaviors.
Yeah, and it could be very easily mistaken as just an enormous wolf.
Right.
What does your family think of what you do?
Well, they try their best to live it down,
Yeah.
But I give my husband and my sons great amounts of credit for their extreme patience with me, and they kind of get a kick out of it. It's nothing any of the three of them are interested in much, but that's okay. It's kind of my thing, and they do their thing, and they're just very good and patient with me about it.
It's fun at Halloween, though.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah. I was just wondering if the neighbors, you know how you always have the people in the neighborhood. Well, what is? Oh, that's the werewolf lady over in
Yeah, I'm sure that people call me that, but that's all right. It's okay because that's how they refer to what I do. But I mean, those who know me, I'm in my church or in the neighborhood or whatever. I'm just Linda, and they don't think any other than I do have a bush that I've in the front yard that I've groomed into a topiary that looks like Bigfoot.
Wow,
that's kind of my only dead giveaway.
Yeah.
Oh well, you got to have markers.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So what's coming up for you in the future, Linda?
Well, right now I'm working on a book about werewolves in general as a subject for a New York publisher. I'm under contract for a couple of other books. I have the book Weird Michigan coming out with Barnes & Noble Publishers this month, later on this month, which is a lot of fun. I co-authored the Weird Wisconsin book. And the weird books have just been, a great boon to me, lots of fun. Everything from spooky legends to weird artists. I've really enjoyed it. Working on some TV projects at the moment, and just all kinds of things coming up.
So TV projects, is it safe to say these are dealing with the incidents at Bray Road or the incidents at Werewolves?
Not necessarily, and I really can't say anything about them, but
I understand. Confidentiality.
They've kind of grown out of my notoriety, I'll put it that way.
Okay. I've got another question from one of our chat room people, and that is, have any electromagnetic field measurements been taken around the areas where the sightings have taken place? Any anomalies found? Okay.
I assume they're talking about using the same instruments that ghost hunters use.
Yeah,
that's right.
You know, that measure the magnetic. Yeah, I actually have one of those, and I have one, and I know how to use it.
All right.
and I've taken it out in places where these things have happened, and I have personally not been able to notice any unusual recordings on it. If I was there closer, I mean, if you were there right at the time of the sighting, that would really be the only, I think, reliable way to get a reading, while the creature itself was present. Because once it's gone, assumingly it takes the
energy
anomalous measurements with it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So that was a good question, by the way.
A very good question, and I'm still interested. When somebody reports a recent sighting to me, and it's something that I can't get to, I urge them to go back, look for prints, whatever. Lots of times they're too scared to, but I urge them anyway. But I'd love it if everybody had a tri-field meter and they could go. I like to call them tricorders, like Star Trek. But people yell at me for that. But if everybody had a tri-field meter and went out and I could get a range of readings on these things at fairly recent dates, I think that would be a very interesting field of data to explore.
Oh, sounds like it. Well, any final words, Linda, about your new book or anything upcoming or anything you just want to talk about? That's beastofbrayroad.com, spelled B-R-A-Y. Anything else?
Well, the books are, I do sell autographed copies on my website through PayPal, but you can get them on Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. They're in a lot of stores, or should be. And they don't really repeat anything. The second one has even more stories in it than the first one, and is different, and different theories. So if people are really interested, I urge them to get those. The website, I try to keep up to date on sightings that have come in since the books went to press, so that people can kind of keep abreast of what's new and happening with it. And other than that, I would just urge people to, keep that camera handy and try and be a little more stalwart than I was. And if you see it, really try and get its picture, especially if you see prints, really try and get a good photograph of them if you can, or make a sketch and compare it to some known sized article, so people can estimate what size it was later.
Or break out that plaster of Paris.
Drag that along
ruler.
wherever you go, plaster of Paris, and please report the sightings. You can get to me off of either of my websites, beastofbrayroad.com. The other main one would be weirdmichigan.com, where I talk about the Michigan Dog Man, which is what they call it. It's the same thing. Okay. Same guy, same bad boy running around all these states.
I hear that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show tonight, Linda. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Anytime.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that was Linda Godfrey.
Indeed it was, and this is that music.
No, we don't need it. I mean, we've got like 4 minutes.
Well, maybe I want to play it anyway. Over and over.
We're going to play it anyway.
Yeah, have something in the background. We've been meaning to change that, guys. We've just been really busy.
Yeah. It's been slack. It's Chuck's fault.
That's right. That's the tertiary quality of a producer.
It's Chuck's fault.
Engineer.
It's his fault. No.
We can blame him for
I
stuff.
don't feel bad about it.
No, I don't either.
Anyway.
So that's a pretty interesting argument. It's a spiritual creature, is a cryptid.
Oh yeah.
I mean, really, and there's really no definitive answer to it. I don't think.
Oh, come on now. I mean, I don't know.
What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know what to think.
That's okay. Well, fair enough.
I think that enough people are seeing this thing that there has to be something out there. There's something's going on.
Yeah.
I just don't know if we know what that is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, out there in the cornfields of rural America.
Ain't nothing like it, man.
No.
Like Kid Rock says, I like, those big corn-fed...
Scott.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can't do that, can I?
You can't.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I mean, but, as far as an actual shape-changing creature, I'm a man, I'm a, to quote the old White Wolf stuff, I hate to do it, but you know.
Oh my God, you're gonna bring role-playing games into this?
Well, it's kind of a cool, you know, the Kronos form, the Glabro, you know, the near wolf and the Wolfman.
He's bringing a role-playing game.
Yeah, well, I sure am. I am, Scott.
All right, man.
You know, and don't act all cool like, oh, I never did that.
Yeah,
oh no, I never played.
No, I did it one time. I just, the white wolf. Yeah,
anyway, what my point was, I mean, you know, the actual shape-changing creature doesn't seem to be it. You know, not necessarily. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. Like I said, there's definitely something going on that we can't explain.
That's right.
And that's why it's World of the Unexplained. That's right, man.
That's why it's on the show.
That's right.
Well, guys, be careful out there, you know, when you drink or don't drink.
Yeah, it's a holiday weekend. Lots of people die usually.
Mainly from explosions.
Oh no, mainly from alcohol-related things going on. So you know, if you party safe, and you know all that good stuff, and you know.
Enjoy the flashing lights and sparkly things.
Next week we have Lloyd Auerbach on the show. Yeah, he's world-renowned parapsychologist, paranormal investigator. World-renowned.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's got his degree as MS in parapsychology from JFK University.
Oh, that's cool.
And he serves on the Board of Ryan Research Center in Durham here in North Carolina. He's been on all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, that's gonna be good.
And also we're having Bill Schnobellen coming on next week, the vampire thing. And you guys can download the first hour of that 9-hour DVD interview. It is a long interview.
Yeah.
But you can download the first hour for 99 cents on the front page of our website. 99 cents. What a deal.
Yeah, just check it out. It's, you know.
Yeah, we make money on that. All of like 20 cents, I think. But still, it's
eventually it'll add up.
But you can check it out that way if you guys want to buy it. You know, see what you're getting into there, because he's going to be on the week after Auerbach. So,
but the DVD collection itself is very interesting. I thought. You know,
oh yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
It's definitely a different angle that I wasn't expecting. You know.
Oh yeah, I agree.
As far as vampirism goes.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess that's it.
We're out of time.
We're out of time. So we're gonna go to our own little cookout and do that.
Yeah. And
go on our page and vote on that Woe2 Crack House $2 pyramid. See if you want it back. I've seen a couple votes in there. Click on the Crack House pyramid at the bottom of the front page and then vote. It's the voting thing's all the way at the bottom of that Woe2 page.
It's like we said before. It's the input that helps us to make a better show for you guys. So.
Well, until next time, this is Jay Scott, the only JD DJ on the OmniSound Radio 1 network.
This is Trent Lackey. We're coming to you from Kernersville, North Carolina. A small town where we talk about big things.
Chuck, you want to say see you or something?
Happy 4th. Thanks for listening.
All right. Later, guys.
Bye.